Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. This is the All Access Med School Admissions Podcast on Lockdown. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Christian Essman, and I have with me today again, Dr. Lina Mehta, our Associate Dean for Admissions. So hello again.
Hi. Hey, Christian. Hey, everybody.
Hello. So we have a talk about the changes that we're making at Case Western in lieu of all the COVID disruptions. And we did this with some advisors, and we liked it so much, we decided let's turn this into a podcast for our listeners. And it's kind of a special one, too, because we're talking through some slides. And I'm going to put a link to the slide presentation in the show notes so that maybe you listen to this once just in audio, but if you want to go back and follow it along with our slides, that might be fun, too. So with that, I'm going to kind of facilitate the conversation here with Dr. Mehta. She's going to be doing a lot of the giving the information here, but it's great to have you back. And
great to be here.
An hour ago on another Zoom meeting.
Yeah, we got to stop meeting like that, all these Zoom calls.
So, Dr. Mehta, why don't you just, before we get into the nitty gritty of what we're going to talk about today, let's kind of take a step back and acknowledge the challenges.
There are a lot of challenges, and I think that in order for us to move ahead and to be as flexible as we need to be in the face of these crazy and uncertain times, we have to acknowledge the challenges and we have to acknowledge the anxiety. There's no doubt that this is an incredibly anxiety-provoking situation, and most of the people listening on this podcast, I would imagine, are much younger than I am, but I would say that certainly in my and even my 80-year-old parents' lifetime, no one has ever even conceived of anything like this. It's really a bad movie or a bad novel. So I think we really have to acknowledge the anxiety that exists with the unknown, with the inability to just predict how things are going to go, the inability to plan. So that is at every level. And that, of course, there's the anxiety, and then there are true tangible challenges, and there are challenges for every constituent. Well, I mean, there are challenges for every citizen of the world right now, and medical school admissions is certainly no different. There are challenges for every constituent involved in this process. The applicants, those of you listening, we know you're facing a lot of anxiety and challenges. Advisors who are trying to work with their applicants to help them find the best path to take forward with the uncertainty that's incumbent in the situation. There's a lot of challenge there. For medical schools, that may not be something that applicants have thought about before, but this is really tough for us in medical school admissions. We want to stay true to our charge of filling our classes, but even more so, need to address the challenges that are present in the practice of medicine and acknowledge our mission to help fill the rank of healthcare providers who are so integral, not just in this pandemic today, but who will be probably more integral as we move forward in the path of medicine. And we want to do right by our applicants. We, contrary to popular belief, I like to think we're not this coven of evil witches who are sitting around and plotting against our applicants. We want to do right by our applicants. We want to do right by the mission that we've been charged with. So, AAMC is doing the best they can right now, and they are under fire with all these blazes they have to put out. MCAT, AMCAS, everybody is facing some serious challenge right now.
Mm-hmm. Before we talk about the things that are specific to our medical school and the changes that we're making, I thought it would be helpful to give kind of a national perspective. And I mean, our listeners should know that we are on phone calls or Zoom meetings weekly with friends of ours at other medical schools. We're all kind of banding together to talk about challenges we're facing and talking things out. What have you been hearing, kind of a national perspective as to like changes that are coming?
So I have the privilege of actually being the chairperson of the National Committee on Admissions. And so I was one of the regional representatives for a few years and just became the national chairperson last month. And so, as you said, Christian, we are really sort of on the front lines of what's going on. And we are in the position of being able to understand the challenges that everyone's facing. And so nationally, there's a very robust dialogue amongst medical schools about how are we going to do this? How are we, again, going to stay true to our mission and do what's right by the applicants? So schools, of course, are talking about, are we going to do a virtual interview season? Are we not going to do a virtual interview season? Are we going to do a hybrid? What are we going to do? What if we have paper involved in our process? How are we going to get paper applications? How are we going to print them and disseminate them? How are we going to get transcripts or notarized documents? How are we going to train our interviewers? How are we going to do admissions committee retreats? How are we going to, if we go virtual, how are we going to help applicants understand the culture of our schools so that they, i.e. you who are listening, can make an informed decision of what environment will suit you the best? So lots and lots of dialogue on the national landscape, really about how are we going to do this and do it successfully. Not that dissimilar from what undergraduate campuses are facing right now in terms of how do you get the culture of your school transmitted to your constituents, your applicants, in a way that's authentic, even though it's virtual.
A few things that I've heard recently in talking with our friends are that, okay, there are a number of schools that already have made that decision that we're going to do all virtual interviewing this fall. There's a lot of schools that are still undecided and trying to figure it out. The MMI schools are trying to figure out how they're going to do virtual interviewing. I heard some schools saying, and we've talked about this already too, that if we do virtual interviewing, then maybe we think about maybe after the first of the year, depending how things look, have first look weekends instead of second look weekends. And so those are just some ideas that have been some of the early ideas that have come out of our initial conversations in just the last couple of weeks of what this interview season is going to look like this year. So I want listeners to know that they should expect this is not going to be like the interview season that we've had in the past. And so expect changes, even though they may have not gone through this process before. It's not going to look like maybe what your friends have told you they experienced. So I think the theme of being adaptable and flexible is going to have to persist through these next several months.
And that adaptability and flexibility is going to have to be on both sides. Applicants, you're going to have to roll with it and try and have faith that schools are doing the best that they can, because we don't have a crystal ball, or at least we don't. Ours seems to be broken. So we're trying to plan as best as we can for the cycle. But if there's anything that the past few weeks and months have taught us, it's that we should prepare to be surprised. Yeah.
Well, hey, let's dive into a little bit about what we're doing at our school as far as the changes that we've made. And I think the theme, just as I mentioned, is we try to add some flexibility to some of the changes that we made. So why don't you kind of walk us through some of the things we've been doing over the last few weeks?
We've been moving fast. We've been having a lot of really vigorous dialogue with the admissions team and the admissions committee, our admissions committee chair, with our curricular people, with the dean of the medical school. We've been really bringing all vested partners in so that we could move as nimbly and flexibly as we possibly could, while still ensuring that we're going to do right by our applicants and future medical students. So we've done a variety of different things. The first thing we did was decide we were going to accept pass, no pass coursework for this current semester, whether you call it your winter or spring semester. And then we also know that a lot of classes are going to be offered online this summer. So we're going to be accepting pass and no pass. So basically the semesters that have been and in the near future will be affected by the pandemic, we're accepting pass, no pass. Of course, we'd always prefer to see grades for prereqs, but we understand we probably don't know the full gamut of challenges that are out there, but we know that it's very challenging for students who are doing virtual learning right now. Do you have high-speed broadband internet at home? We talked to a pre-med advisor whose students weren't even able to go back to their dorm room after spring breaks and get their laptops because the university closed so quickly, or their books. The university closed so quickly. Are you somebody who's a family of 5 living in a 1-bedroom apartment where you go to have quiet time to study? So we understand challenges of equity and access. We understand logistic operational challenges. So again, do we prefer grades for prereqs? We do. But are you going to be penalized for showing pass, no pass coursework? Not at all. We're also going to accept online courses, obviously, because that's where they're all happening right now. But we're going to include online labs as well. If your school is offering labs in an online format, we will absolutely accept those.
And if things change in the fall, I think you're going to hear not only us, but other med schools come out with some other updates. It's just going to be a fluid situation. And
I know that I'm going to just piggyback on what you just said, Christian. I know that fluidity is maybe anxiety provoking for applicants, people who are listening, because we all want answers, but we know we can't provide answers. And I think it would be really disingenuous for us to say that this is how it's going to be, because we know that we have to stay flexible and iterate as needed. So just know, for those of you who are listening, that we're going to respond in the most authentic and fair way that we can if new challenges crop up down the road.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that happened recently, AMCAS came out and said, we're moving back the verification downloads, download of verified applications back 2 weeks to July 10th. So in response to that, we've moved our application timelines back. Can you explain what that means and what that's going to look like?
Yeah, so AMCAS also has been having very robust dialogue about the challenges that applicants and pre-health advisors and universities and everybody are going to be facing with the pandemic. Is it tougher to get letters of recommendation because the physician who is going to write one for you is on the front lines taking care of COVID patients? Is your university going to have a delay in transcript submission? Is your pre-health committee having difficulty meeting because everything's virtual? So we understand that AMCAS understood that there were some hitches, potential glitches in the process. So what that means is, so the data transmission, the date that medical schools will receive AMCAS applications is moved back 2 weeks. So that will hopefully give applicants and pre-med advisors a little bit of extra time to get their ducks in a row and get their applications percolating in the way that they need to. So in response to that, there's just so many variables in this process. So we at our school have decided to move our timelines back even further from there. And that's, again, precipitated by all of the uncertainty and also by the MCAT. We know that MCAT dates for April and May were canceled, and they are hopefully going to be in play for the rest of the summer and fall. And quite frankly, the old application processes were timed such that if you took a late summer MCAT or an early fall MCAT, your likelihood went down because we were already reviewing by then, and we've already invited most of our people to interview by then. And so we are fully aware of the MCAT issues that are in play right now. So we've moved everything later to accommodate, not just accommodate, but to actually embrace applicants with late summer and fall MCATs. So we're going to be screening later. We're going to start our application review process later. We've moved our whole interview season back at least a month. We used to interview August through January. Now we're going to interview September through February. Our admissions committee, we're probably going to batch acceptances more than we did before, so we can get a better view of the landscape than we did when we were moving on earlier. So we moved our AMCAS primary deadline later to November 1, moved our secondary application deadline later to December 1st. So moving everything back later will certainly give more latitude to applicants who wind up taking later MCATs.
So the thing regarding MCAT and secondaries, we want to tell people that we're sending our secondaries out to everybody with a verified AMCAS application. We're not going to hold and wait for those MCAT scores to come in. So you can submit the secondary without an MCAT score. We still require the MCAT. We'll talk about that in a minute here. But we know because these MCAT dates have been kind of realigned that we don't want you to be kind of waiting to get the secondary. So we could talk maybe more about that in a minute, but I wanted to, as we're talking about that secondary application deadline, that's important to kind of point out. So we're talking about MCAT. So we're going to be looking at taking those. We're looking at taking those students who be taking the MCAT in the late summer, and they've added dates now in September. Who knows how things go? They maybe will end up adding dates in October. We don't know that yet. What about the other change we made regarding the years of how old we would take?
Yeah, so our MCAT used to have a shelf life of 3 years. So 3 years, the MCAT was valid up to 3 years prior to that application cycle. So it would have been a 2017 MCAT was viable for us. But we understand these challenges. So we've expanded the shelf life, if you will, to now 4 years. So the oldest MCAT that we'll accept is now a 2016. So hopefully that will give applicants a little bit more latitude so that they don't have to retest if it's been in the past 4 years instead of 3.
Yep. So that might be beneficial to some people. So that if they're considering retaking the MCAT this year and they're running into problems, that might be helpful. One of the last things is about the updates to our secondary that we're making. I think a lot of schools are doing this. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, we've added an optional essay, and there was a lot of dialogue about should we have a national essay that goes into the AMCAS application. And we have so many MD allopathic medical schools that each with different missions and different processes, that the decision was made to not have an optional essay nationally, but for schools to have one, decide how they wanted to run this process. So that was a little rambly, but what we're doing is we're adding an optional essay to our secondary, which will give applicants the ability to tell us if and how they've been affected by COVID-19. Were there academic issues, financial issues? We're well aware that we are close to a recession if we're not in one right now. We know a lot of people have been laid off from work. Have there been medical issues? We know we have applicants who have family members and loved ones affected by COVID. Other interruptions, we know that work has been truncated, research experiences, clinical shadowing, leadership, extracurricular activities, everything has been interrupted because of this pandemic. So we want to give applicants the opportunity, if they would like, to share with us some of the challenges that they faced so that we can further contextualize the application. You don't have to fill it out. It's an optional essay. But some of the students we've spoken to, it felt stress alleviating for them to be able to just share with us what they perceive to be the challenges they've faced. So that's a new essay in our secondary application. I
think, as I said, a lot of schools are going to be adding this type of essay. So you should be prepared to, if you have things to share, be prepared to write that kind of essay. Because again, it's going to help put into context other parts of your application. Like Dr. Mehta said, we know a lot of experiences have been interrupted, and like she said, you're shadowing and groups and volunteering and research. So I think it's worth, crafting a response to put in there to kind of help us understand what was put on pause for you. And then of course, like she said, anything that has changed academically or financially or medically due to this virus. So but be prepared, because again, we're talking to a lot of our friends. Everybody's adding some type of question like this. Not everybody, but for a lot of people we talk to are going to be doing this.
And for anyone who may be applying osteopathic, AAMC, the application service for osteopathic schools, has made this part of their standard application. So if you're applying osteopathic, you will be answering that question. And
I have to believe we will have this question in place for the next several years, because it's affecting not just, the people that are applying now, but freshmen and sophomores. And
in fact, in many ways, I suspect that this year may be the least disruptive. I know it feels so acute and terrifying, but there are going to be long-term sequelae of this. And I would love for the pandemic to be over this summer, but I highly doubt that that's going to be the case. So all of us need to prepare ourselves for the long run. And
do you want to make any kind of just a final comment before we talk about what changes have happened in the med school about how we're going to be working with our screeners and interviewers? I think applicants should kind of hear and know that it's not going to be business as usual. So what are we going to do on that end?
Yeah, so we're going to have a lot of robust conversation and training of everybody who's involved in our admissions process. We're not going to be able to look for the same things that we used to. We sort of had not formulas per se. We do holistic review, but most of us who've been engaged in admissions in our office have been doing it for so long that we're quite comfortable with what we were looking for, who we were going to invite, who we're going to interview, that kind of thing. That's all gone now. We're going to have to be far more holistic than we've even been in the past. And we're probably going to expand the MCAT ranges that we've been considering, the GPA ranges. We're not going to be able to look for the same experiences and exposures and activities that we were before. So we have an admissions committee retreat coming up in June where we're going to really talk about this in depth, about how we're going to open things up for our applicant pool. We have to train our screeners, we have to train our interviewers, and then again, our admissions committee members we all need to change the way that we used to think and open up our minds to understand a much broader definition of what the successful applicant's going to look like.
Yep, absolutely. Well, then the other thing I think we wanted to talk about was, so we've kind of talked about how we're changing things for the applicants. And at the end of this, I want to ask you a few frequently asked questions we've received in our inbox. But before we go to that, let's talk about what changes were made in the med school and how did did CASE respond to the changes for our students?
So I have to tell you that I've been the dean of admissions. I've been in the admissions office at Case Western Reserve for, 16 years, 15 years. Something like that, I started when I was like 4. I was precocious. Yeah, very precocious. I've been in the admissions office for so long. I've been at Case Western for a long time, faculty. And I have never been so proud to be a Case Western Reserve School of Medicine faculty and medical education member as I am right now. The response of our school has exceeded expectations for me. Our teams have been unbelievable. So I'll talk more about that, but I mean, really, I love our school. We've done amazing things. So, part of the way our curriculum is structured, the technology that we use and the learning vehicles that we've been delivering lent themselves very well to transitioning quickly. So IQ Inquiry Group is team-based learning, and that's sort of the crown jewel of our curriculum. We were able to very successfully conduct IQ through Zoom meetings online. And I really believe that the students and the facilitators still were able to keep that connection going. They were able to learn in the way that they were learning in real time. Is it the same as sitting in a room together? No, of course not. But were we able to deliver it in a very effective way? Absolutely. I believe this very strongly. And so IQ groups, online, not interrupted, have gone really, really, really well. They
were on spring break and they were told during spring break,
don't come back.
Don't come back. But school will continue Monday morning, and they set up Zoom IQ groups for everybody, and they adapted like that. I mean, the way, how quickly the curriculum pivoted to this online version, like what you said. Is it ideal? No, we'd love to be around the table working with each other, but they're still able to connect and see each other and continue to do the learning that they need to do. And now they have their exams coming up in just a couple of weeks. So that was a pleasant surprise.
Come back, we meant don't come back to the health education campus.
Yeah.
And we can talk about what's happening at the HUC in a moment. But some students were in Cleveland already or moved back to Cleveland. And so they're doing virtual school either from their apartments or houses in Cleveland, or they've gone home. But it's really been quite seamless for IQ, I have to say. And I'm blown away by our curricular team who pulled it together so quickly.
When it comes to technology, there's another aspect that was an easy or seemingly easy implementation, and that had to do with HoloLens. Many people know that we partner with Microsoft HoloLens to create HoloAnatomy as a part of our anatomy curriculum. And so tell them what they did with that.
So the HoloAnatomy I could talk about for quite some time, but in the interest of time, I will not. But suffice it to say that it's a really remarkable method of learning anatomy through virtual reality. And so when the pandemic hit and we realized that we couldn't have our students get back together again in anatomy, what did our curricular team do? They mailed the HoloLens goggles to each and every student who was enrolled in anatomy, and they are doing virtual HoloLens from home. So again, anatomic curriculum not interrupted. They're still doing what they need to do. And if you're listening to this, do take a look at the slide deck that Christian uploads, because you'll see some pretty cool snapshots. Christian, maybe you could load the videos.
Yeah, I'll put a link to that YouTube video. That's a short video about how they did this. But so they have the students set up in small groups and they meet at certain times during the week. And the dean of, or the instructor for anatomy, Dr. Suwish Bharat, she's in charge of anatomy. She's also on our admissions committee. She teaches them from her study in Cleveland. And so in these goggles, there are speakers that are, built into it. And so they can hear her instruction, and her goggles have a colored laser beam that goes onto the hologram. And so they can see what she is looking at and directing them to. So it's pretty incredible. I mean, it really is.
It's remarkable. I mean, we just transitioned to this anatomic model this year. We had been piloting for the past 2 years, and thank goodness we did. Not only is it an incredibly effective way to learn anatomy, but it's an incredibly effective way to learn anatomy during a pandemic.
And it continues to be interactive. They can hear her and see what she's asking to,
and engage with group
focus.
members.
Yeah.
Yep.
Pretty remarkable stuff. That kind of is what we've done for our first years. Our second years had already transitioned into studying for boards and moving on to as they progress into their third year. Why don't you tell everybody what we did for the students that were in their clinical years?
So certainly it's been very challenging to figure out how to add to the educational experience for third and fourth year students who should be on the wards. Our students were, as with every medical school virtually in the U.S., were pulled from the wards when the pandemic really started to make itself seen, pulled off for a variety of different reasons, one of which is PPE, the personal protective equipment that I'm sure many of you have read about, or the lack thereof. So that was where the biggest challenge was. How do we educate our third and fourth year students who should be hands-on with patients? So again, my mind was blown by the creativity and the engagement of not just the dean team, if you will, the curricular people at the School of Medicine, but our clinicians who are far-flung at all 4 of our major teaching sites. They developed remote learning electives. And again, if you can look at the slide deck when you have a moment, you can see the incredible depth and breadth of elective ranging from geriatric consultations to pandemics in context to radiology to a remote intensive care unit acting internship. Also, acting internships are something that are required for fourth year medical students to complete. It's basically like mini residency. You wear the pager, you're the first one that's being called by the floors. You're sort of getting that adrenal squeeze over with, or at least mitigated before you're really on the line. So we've reconfigured our acting internship schedules to ensure that our students get to do those. We refined online testing. We changed our grading, as many schools are doing, and our team did that with a lot of consultation with program directors. And our Dean of Medical Student Research, Dr. Kroninger, even came up with online research opportunities. So it's been unbelievable to me, the rapid response and the creativity that has surfaced with our entire team of educators.
And at the time we're recording this, I think the plan is to start to reintegrate the third and fourth years, or the third years, back into the clinics starting June 1st is kind of what the plan is. So this is not going to last forever, but they're already making plans to get those students back.
It's not going to last forever, but again, prepare to be surprised is how we're all preparing right now. And you just don't know what's going to happen. So I have complete confidence that we'll be able to roll with whatever presents itself.
So, and then we already had some advantages in place. Like I think this, when we laid this out, and we talked about this with advisors, they were impressed, and we were thankful for that. But we had a few things already in place. And one of them is every year for the past, I don't know how many years since we've had the new curriculum. It's not new anymore.
At least a decade.
It's over.
Academia new. If you're not 100 years old, you're new. So
in the first week or the first or second week of the curriculum, when new med students get there, they do an annual pandemic exercise. Tell them about that.
Basically our students do a tabletop pandemic exercise. And I was on a call the other day. I'm a member of the Academy of Scholar Educators at the School of Medicine. And one of our faculty was talking about last year, she was a facilitator for the pandemic exercise. And, the med students would go through it, but it didn't resonate. And one of the finishing first year students was on a Zoom call with her and said, Dr. X, oh my gosh, we're living what we did in block 1. This is unbelievable. She said it just started to unfold, and everything that we learned in block 1 during that tabletop exercise is what we're seeing now. I feel so prepared and so able to respond in a way to this pandemic as much as anyone can. So I thought that was pretty cool. I have to say.
When the students, they're teamed up, and one group, there's some students that they're media members, and another group, they're government members, and another group, they're clinicians in the hospitals and nurses, and then there are students that are general public people, and they're public health officials that are assigned roles, and so there is police officers and students are, and so there's all these different situations that we're seeing play out right now. And they went through it. And like you said, maybe at the time they're kind of like, we're doing this flu pandemic exercise, and just to kind of see how public health works. Because block 1 of our curriculum has a big public health theme. So this is one of the ways they kind of set that stage to show how public health, it plays a huge role in the community. But now it's that academics imitating, life that we're going through right now.
Yeah. And so I mentioned before the technology and flexibility that were already part of our curricula, and flexibility was certainly always the name of the game. And that's what helped us pivot, I think, very readily. And then, there was an advantage that I didn't really think about until all of this hit. So away rotations are a big deal for students as they start to put together their residency application, particularly if you want to go into a really competitive specialty, say ENT or plastics or derm, or something like that. It's in your best interest to do away rotations, not just to potentially, quote unquote, audition at a residency program that you may be interested in, but to get a very broadly based view of what that subspecialty may look like at different institutions. So as you can imagine, all of these away rotations are shut down right now. No one's traveling. Institutions are not, their own medical students aren't on the wards, let alone visiting medical students. So it is possible that these rotations may not be able to come to fruition for everybody, but we are so lucky at Case Western because we have not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 major teaching affiliates that our students rotate through. And so virtually every residency program, every subspecialty, every fellowship that you could ever imagine, we have at least 1, if not 2, at Case Western Reserve. So all of our students will be able to do the equivalence of away rotations at our home institution. So that is huge, that everything is here at their disposal.
That's when after we started talking about that, it really kind of hit us that, wow, these visiting rotations may not happen in the fall, and because of travel, who knows what the airline industry is going to look like, and so many variables. So once we kind of really laid this out, and you made it clear, like, wow, this is really our students. If they can't leave here, then they're in a good position.
Oh yeah.
We've talked about how we've responded as a admissions office. We talked about how we responded to our current students. Tell us, explain to people how we've responded to our local community.
So Case Western Reserve is very well integrated into our local community, and we've had many, many levels of response. For one thing, Dr. Heidi Gullett, who's one of our primo curricular people and a practicing physician, is the head of the Cuyahoga Board of Health. So she's been unbelievably responsive, and she has engaged our medical students with the command center. So our medical students are manning the phone lines. They're answering questions from anxious members of the community. They're helping with disease tracing, meaning looking at, if a patient comes down with COVID, how many other people have you engaged with? And again, doing consultations with worried members of the community, or even with patients who think they may have COVID. So medical students very engaged in this process. And then our medical students themselves are unbelievable, selfless, engaged people, and they have set up all sorts of services for physicians and other healthcare providers to help with childcare. Our daycares are closed. What do you do if you're a 2 healthcare practitioner family and you're not staying at home and working from home? You're in the hospital, in the trenches. So they've set up childcare teams that are helping with childcare, grocery shopping, pet walking. If your kids are doing virtual learning, which all of our kids are, they'll come and help your kids get through school. So a lot of engagement on many, many levels in our local community.
But the big one is the one that really has affected us, because we're working from home, but we will be for a while. And that's because
the fabulous new state of the future health education campus that we just moved into in May, that houses medicine, dental, and the PA program and nursing, has been turned into an overflow hospital for the Cleveland Clinic Foundation called the Hope Hospital, where COVID positive but medically stable patients will be housed happily fortunately, the social distancing in the state of Ohio has really paid off, and we have not had to utilize these surge services. But the Hope Hospital will stay in play for the next few months at least, as our state slowly reopens and a possible surge does hit. And then if anyone's been sort of following the public health forecast, we'll probably see peaks and troughs over the next, into the winter at least. So Hope Hospital will stay in place, but it has been unbelievable the way our health education campus has been converted into this hospital. It's remarkable. Christian, I think you actually went in there.
Yeah, I was there last week. Yeah, and I think if you, again, go into the slide deck and we put a side by side of the before and after of there's a huge atrium courtyard in the middle of our building, and they took all the furniture out and they have installed basically a ward. With, right now there are 328 beds in there, but it could have a capacity of 1,000 if necessary. And I had to go there last week to pick up some more computer equipment that I didn't grab. And they built what they call an oxygen farm right outside of our window. They took out, I think, 2 or 4 trees to put this in, and there's copper piping installed throughout the entire building to move the oxygen supply to all parts of the building for potential patients. So I can see why they want to keep this installed for a while, because it was a major undertaking. And so we plan on not being in our offices until September or through September. We'll see.
If even, yeah. And one of my really good friends is actually the chief medical officer for the Hope Hospital. And she told me about the strategy that went into building this overflow hospital. And my hat is off to, again, the creativity and inventiveness of all of our faculty.
And lastly, I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast may not be from Ohio. I have a lot of listeners who are in other parts of the country. And I think it's worth giving a nod to our state's response. People have been following the news. They may have seen how Ohio has been responding. Can you comment on that?
Ohio has responded admirably. In fact, they took such early action that I was even skeptical. It started on March 3rd, where we had the Arnold Schwarzenegger bodybuilding classic scheduled in Columbus, Ohio, with 60,000 attendees scheduled and slated to attend. And that was the first action our state took, where they canceled all attendees and all visitors. And the competitors were allowed to do their thing on stage, but no one was allowed to be in the audience. And then on March 9th, 3 positive tests were declared in the state of Ohio, and Governor Mike DeWine, declared a state of emergency. March 12th, Ohio State closed, schools started closing, and since then, we didn't have our surge. Knock on wood, we didn't have the surge that was predicted. We hope we don't. We pray we don't. But it's truly through the actions of Governor Mike DeWine and Dr. Amy Acton, who's the head of the Board of Health for the state of Ohio. She is amazing. Rockstar, girl crush all the way for me. I'm not just the only person. She's got a huge literal fan club, T-shirts, bobbleheads. The New York Times just profiled her. Anyone check it out. Her communication style.
I'll find the links to those. Yeah.
Find the link. I mean, her communication style is exactly what we as physicians should be doing anyway. And just the vulnerability, she's unbelievable. And so she is definitely the brains behind all of this. And kudos to Governor DeWine for letting her advise in the way she needed to advise. So we feel great here in the state of Ohio. We know that our reopening is going to be very slow and gradual, and they're ready to shut it down again if things start to spike at a dangerous level. So I feel great here in the state of Ohio right now, I have to tell you.
So let's talk about the future. We said that we just mentioned we're not going to be back in our building for quite a while. We're moving to all virtual interviews this fall. What do you think that's going to look like?
I'm not sure. We're talking about it. I don't have any doubt we're going to make it happen. I mean, I call our admissions team the admissions dream team, and they are very dreamy because they all creative, tech savvy, think outside the box, excellent at communication. So we're going to have virtual interviews for the whole year. We're not going to start it out and then turn it live. We also know that can we not only just not get into the building, but we also are aware of the issues for applicants as well. What if you live in a hot spot? How are you going to travel? Will you travel? What are airfares going to look like? What are flights going to look like? Are we going to check your temperature when you come in for interview day? What if you have a fever? Do you have to quarantine before you come for interview day for 2 weeks? Do we give you a mask? How do you socially distance during a live interview? There's so many variables that I feel so relieved that we've made the decision to just go to a virtual interview process. So I don't know what it's going to look like yet. As Christian, you said at the beginning, it's not going to look like it looked last year. It's not going to look like it's looked like for the past 10 years. But I'm confident we'll be able to do it in the way that it needs to be done.
Yeah, I think applicants this year should start to maybe there's a lot of resources out on the internets about doing interviews by your computer. I mean, simple things like raising your computer up and getting at the right eye angle so that you look like you're not looking straight down at your computer. There's a lot of things that you can do.
Little tips and tricks.
Lighting and you're going to still be dressed up for your interview and look at your backgrounds and stuff like that. So there's a lot of ways I think you can professionalize your in-home interview. It's going to be a little different. It's going to feel probably a little awkward at times, but there are ways that I think as an applicant, you could probably really amp it up, and people might notice like, wow, they had everything arranged in the background, and you might be able to impress people by the way you prepare for your virtual interview.
And that said, we're going to have to figure out how to train our fleet of 70 odd interviewers to figure out how their camera needs to be, what the lighting needs to be, what the background looks like. So they too, on our end, I really do hope that everybody gets into the we're all in it together mindset. We're trying on our end to make this as successful as we can. We know there are going to be glitches because it's brand new. And on your end, we know you're going to do the best you can, but we also recognize there may be some glitches on your end too, because this is brand new. So we're all in it together, and we're just going to have to assume good faith on both ends.
What about, so we have an incoming class coming in the next few months. Talk about that. What's that going to look like?
It's going to be a dual delivery model. We are in no way, shape, or form ready to eliminate social distancing. So it's going to have components of virtual education, and then when possible, safe social distancing in live situations. We do understand how very important it is for the class to build connections with one another as well as with the faculty and the deans. So it is definitely going to be a dual delivery model. It's still being hammered out, but components of both will be present.
Yeah, they're looking at the guidance from the state as far as like how many people can be together at one time and social distancing and what.
And safety is our number one concern, right? So we will never do anything that jeopardizes the safety of our students or our faculty.
And also we have to get, we're talking with the university as well as what they're going to be allowing to occur on campus. As far as looking ahead to other topics, what do you think the impact is going to be on future application cycles?
There's going to be a lot. As I said, this may actually be the least complicated admission cycle. I don't know. It seems horrible because it's so sudden and unexpected, but we're going to have to just prepare to roll with it. We can't expect to see the same levels of shadowing. Research, we know research has been very interrupted for most undergrads. For MD, PhD programs, they're very concerned, as they should be. A lot of students have that fire and love for research lit early on in the undergraduate careers. And if you're not able to be in the labs right now, will the fire burn with the same intensity as it may have? I don't know. So we know we're going to have to be continually recalibrating how we're reviewing applications and what we're looking for. We just know that. So we're just going to have to stay flexible and understand the landscape and the backdrop against which these applications are positioned. Yeah.
And finally, about one of the other important topics that this was the big news before the pandemic news was USMLE Step 1 announced that they're going to pass fail. And so what do you think the implications are now?
So we did a little quick podcast on that because it was such breaking news that Step 1 was going pass fail, because the score on Step 1 was like the holy grail. It was the key to the castle of which residency program you were going to get into. And it really achieved extremely unhealthy levels of significance. So for those of us who work in med ed, we are euphoric that it's pass fail. But, that's tough. Programs aren't going to know how to evaluate candidates. I am not worried about that at all for our students. What are programs going to look at? They're going to look for research. We have research built into our curriculum and more opportunities to engage in research than you could shake a stick at. Our students get involved both inside and outside of the classroom. They have incredibly robust clinical experiences. So I don't know that the pass-fail grading for step one is really going to have any impact on our students. I think they're going to be good to go.
Yeah, I do too. Hey, before we wrap things up, I want to pose some questions to you that I think are, we've received these in our general email account, but I have to think these are common questions of a lot of prospective applicants or current applicants. So I'm going to go through a few of these. So common questions we received. Number one, what about prereqs that are taken for pass, no pass? Will that put me at a disadvantage, do you think?
So I think I already answered this. Mm-hmm. Would we prefer to see prereqs with a grade? We would. But is it going to penalize you? No. We understand that there are so many variables at play that pass, no pass, maybe actually the only option your school even gave you. Mm-hmm. So we're just going to take pass, no pass with no questions asked.
I heard an applicant or a prospective applicant got some advice, not from an admissions office, but from another entity, that they said, if you have grade optional, either do all grades or all pass, no pass. What do you think about that?
I think it depends on the applicant. I think it depends on the method of educational delivery and the ease of taking classes. If you want to take your prereqs for a grade and take everything pass, no pass, do it. But if it causes untoward stress and burden, and don't do it. Mm-hmm. It's really going to be applicant dependent.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so am I at a disadvantage if my MCAT doesn't happen until the fall? Will it be too late in the application cycle?
So as we mentioned, we've moved all of our deadlines back to not just accommodate applicants who've taken a late MCAT, but to actually embrace applicants who've taken a late MCAT. We're going to be very mindful of how we're making interview offers so that late MCAT applicants will have equal likelihood of being offered an interview as early MCAT takers had as well. So no, there's no disadvantage to taking a late MCAT for us this year. And It's important that applicants look at the MSR, the Medical School Admissions Requirements resource, where schools will hopefully have updated their new policies and their new timing, new guidelines, whatever. And then check out, if you're particularly interested in a school, hopefully they've updated their website as well to help you understand what this brave new world looks like for them.
Yep. All right. Here's another one regarding the MCAT. What if I'm retaking the MCAT and my next MCAT is delayed until the fall? Should I wait to apply until my new score comes in? Will schools review my application with the old MCAT, which presumably would be lower? What do you think?
So it's going to be school dependent. There are some schools who are saying that they're going to interview applicants even if they don't have an MCAT. There's some schools who are saying that they'll offer you an interview based on your old MCAT. At our school, if you tell us you're taking a new MCAT, we're going to wait to review you. Because if we review on your old MCAT and we say no, that's extremely unfair to you because maybe you brought up your new MCAT. So for us, we're going to wait to review your application until we see your new score. That said, I would not wait to apply until you get your new score, because say you're a September MCAT taker, you wait to apply, you may be looking at October, November, depending on how long it takes you to turn your secondary around. If you want to wait to pay at the very last minute, you can do that. We wouldn't fault you for doing that, but I would get the application percolating.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I know, talking to some friends at our other schools, some people said they're going to evaluate with the MCAT that they have. But I want applicants to know that if you're registered for a future MCAT, we can see that date. And so in our database, we have that. If it looks for, if somebody has a future MCAT, it basically pulls them out of our queue to be reviewed until that MCAT score shows up from that date. And then it's thrown back in to be reviewed if everything else has been completed. So there's ways that we can filter those applications out. So we're not screening people with an old MCAT that they're anticipating taking a new one.
So it is going to take a little more legwork, I'm sorry to say, for applicants who are listening this year to understand what each school is going to be doing. As I said, we tried to centralize it in the MSR, the Committee on Admissions, but I think it's tough for every school to get every school to put in their new policies and articulate them in a uniform way. So people who are applying this year, you're probably going to have to do a little more legwork, checking out websites and everything to see what schools are going to be doing. Sorry to tell you.
We heard from one of our friends that any changes they make have to go through their faculty senate.
Yes.
So it's not like they can just say, you know what, we're going to take pass, no pass, or we're going to take these any changes they make have to go through their university, basically.
Which is a long and drawn out process for approval. So don't be mad at schools if they haven't been able to update their new policies yet. Maybe be sympathetic because they may have way more hoops to jump through than we do in order to get changes passed.
Here's the last question. And this is a tough one. I'm in an area of the country where I may not be able to take the MCAT exam for a while. Because it's a hot spot or there's a lot going on there. Am I at a disadvantage?
I wish I could unequivocally say you are not at a disadvantage, but there's a reality. Some schools aren't pushing their deadlines back the way we are. Some schools are probably going to fill their interview slots quickly as they generally do. So I really wish I could tell that question asker that they're not at a disadvantage. Again, at CASE, we're going to do everything we possibly can to not just accept, but to embrace these late MCAT. So
that's a tough one.
It's a tough one.
But I put it on here because this affects a lot of people. I mean,
it affects a lot of people on the coast where you're still in hot spots and still shut down. So it's going to be school to school dependent. Again, at our school, we're opening things up so that there will not be a disadvantage, but I can't speak for all schools in that regard.
Dr. Mehta, at what point would you recommend somebody, maybe they're dead set on applying this year and it's just not because of all the circumstances and situations that maybe you go, why don't you hold off this year and not try to do it this year? Because it just doesn't seem to be lining up.
That's really tough for me to comment on right now. If the MCAT was going to be a go for the rest of the summer and fall as anticipated, I would say if you're in a hot spot and shut down and you just can't take an MCAT, but what if, God forbid, the MCAT doesn't go forward? Are we going to accept people without an MCAT? I don't know. We have to be prepared to be flexible. So it's really hard for me to answer that question because I just don't know how things are going to roll out.
Yeah, somebody asked me that the other day. At what point do I kind of pull the plug? And I said, but that's the same kind of thing. I don't know. I wish we could see in the future.
I would say if the MCAT goes forward and you can't take any of the dates, even through the end of September, for us, it's probably not going to happen. There are a few schools who have said they're going to try and accept January MCATs. So that's where students are going to have to do individual sleuthing to see which schools would still be considering them. And then let me segue a little bit and build on that question. I've had a few applicants ask me, should I even apply this year? I mean, should I apply? I mean, will things be better? Things are going to be better next year. I'm like, we still have to admit people this year. We still have to fulfill our mission. So I don't know if things are going to be better next year. Things may be even weirder next year. I don't know. So apply when you are ready to apply. We still are doing business. We're open for business. This may look a little bit different, but we are open for business. We're still going to be doing our thing.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to end things. We're open for business. And, so I want to thank everybody for listening to this one. We have other episodes coming. Some good ones coming down the road. But we wanted to get this one out to everybody. So Dr. Mehta, thanks for joining me today. It's great to see you. And probably talk to you another hour or so.
Yeah, you probably will. If not, I'll email you or text you. But for everybody listening, again, just please give yourself some grace. Understand that it's going to be a different year. We don't expect you to present the same application that you did in years past. And by the same token, please give us a little grace and understand that we're doing this the very best that we can.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Good luck. Be safe. Be healthy. Be well.
Yep. See you next time.
Bye.